She was sitting at the edge of her bed in the dark, not crying, not praying out loud, not reaching for anything that could interrupt what was happening inside her. She was just sitting, still in a way that wasn't peaceful, still in the way a storm is still at its eye, everything moving at full speed on the inside while the outside held its breath. Her name was Zoe Spencer, 28 years old, and tonight the weight of her own life had become too loud to carry standing up. It wasn't one thing. That's what made it so hard to resolve. If it were one thing, she could pray through it, sleep on it, wake up and face it. But it wasn't one thing. It was everything. All at once, converging on this particular night in this particular bedroom, like God had decided to call every outstanding account at the same time. Her mother had called that afternoon, not to check in, to push. When are you coming home for Christmas? When are you going to slow down? When are you going to let someone in? Her mother meant well. Her mother always meant well. But meaning well and doing well are two different things, and Zoe had stopped explaining that distinction a long time ago. Work was consuming her, not in a productive way, in a way that had started to feel like disappearing. She had built something real. A consulting firm she started from a spare bedroom that now carried a full staff, serious clients, and the kind of reputation that takes years and costs more than money to earn. She was excellent at what she did. She knew that. But somewhere between building the dream and living inside it, she had quietly lost the thread of who she was outside of what she produced. Her finances were stable. Her career was ascending. Her home was warm and her own, not glassy and dramatic, not a skyline apartment with a concierge and floor-to-ceiling windows, a house on a quiet street, real wood floors, a front porch she actually used, bookshelves running the full length of one wall, a prayer corner by the window that still held her grandmother's old Bible. She had built a life that looked, by almost every visible measure, like a woman who had it together. And she did. And she was exhausted. And she was lonely in the particular way that's most invisible to the people around you, because you're too capable, too composed, too aware of God's goodness to say it out loud without feeling like you're being ungrateful. And then underneath all of it, Christopher, who had nothing to do with the work exhaustion or her mother's pressure or the quiet ache of being known only at the surface by most people in her life. Christopher, who had arrived in the middle of all of it and made everything feel simultaneously more beautiful and more complicated. Christopher, whose name she hadn't yet brought to God tonight because she didn't have the strength to hold it alongside everything else. She exhaled, reached for her journal on the nightstand, opened it to a blank page, and sat there with the pen in her hand, not writing, just holding it. Because sometimes the truest prayers are the ones that don't have words yet. Sometimes the most honest thing you can bring God is an open page and the willingness to stay in the room. She had been staying in this particular room, this season, this question, this convergence of everything, for longer than she wanted to admit. Tonight, she finally stopped trying to find the exit. Zoe had grown up in a house where faith was not theoretical. Her parents hadn't handed her a polished version of Christianity designed to make her comfortable. They handed her something sturdier and more demanding, a faith expected to hold under pressure, to cost something, to produce character before it produced anything else. Her father had been a deacon for 30 years, not a man of many words, a man of consistent presence. He taught her, mostly by example, that the size of your faith is not measured in how loudly you declare things, but in what you do in the silence when God hasn't said anything new yet. Her mother was different, warmer, more expressive, the kind of woman who prayed over every meal like it was a full service. She had filled Zoe's childhood with scripture not as ammunition, but as nourishment. The way you feed a child vegetables before they know enough to resist. By the time Zoe was grown, faith was not a costume she wore on Sundays. It was the architecture of her, the frame inside every decision, the first language of her inner life. That meant, among other things, that she had never been casual about relationships, not from rigidity, from understanding that the person you choose to build a life with is a spiritual decision before it is a romantic one, that what you allow into your closest proximity will shape you, toward God or away from Him. She had watched too many women she loved make that choice without that awareness. Not bad women, faithful women. Women who had loved God sincerely and still ended up married to someone who quietly chipped away at everything God had built in them. She had sat with those women in their private grief. She held what they told her carefully, soberly, as instruction. So she waited, not passively, not bitterly. She built, she served, she grew, she prayed with specificity, and then released the specific to God, because she understood that He knew the answer to the prayer better than she knew the prayer itself. She had almost given up on the expectation twice, not on God, on the desire. There is a grief in releasing something you've carried for years, a necessary grief, the kind that produces a deeper dependence on God than you could have accessed if He'd answered quickly. She had gone through that grief, come out the other side quieter, more rooted, more genuinely surrendered. And then October came. It was an inter-church ministry collaboration meeting. She was representing Cornerstone Fellowship. He was there for New Harbor, a congregation across the city whose young adults ministry had been doing serious, consistent work in the community. She had heard of the church. She had not heard of him. His name was Christopher James. He sat across the table, unhurried, present in the way that people who are genuinely secure tend to be present, not performing stillness, just actually in the room. He asked 2 questions during the meeting. Both of them revealed a man who thought pastorally, not just strategically. A man who had sat with real people in real difficulty and taken the weight of that seriously. She noticed it the way you notice craftsmanship, without looking for it, impossible to miss once it registers. After the meeting, he approached her, introduced himself, asked a straightforward follow-up question about the children's ministry component of the collaboration. They talked logistics, and then neither of them moved. The conversation opened the way good conversations do, when 2 people discover, without planning it, that they're operating from the same depth of conviction. He was direct without being aggressive. He listened the way people listen when they're genuinely interested rather than waiting for their turn. He laughed, not performatively, the way a person laughs when something lands precisely. At the door, he stopped, turned back. I'd like to continue this conversation, not just the ministry side of it. Clear, honest, no game in it. She drove home and sat in her driveway for 10 minutes without going inside, not because she was overwhelmed, because she was paying attention to what was happening in her spirit. And what was happening was not giddiness. It was something she had learned over years of walking closely with God to take seriously when it showed up. A leaning, not toward a feeling, toward a person. She went inside, made tea, opened her journal, and wrote 1 line before she prayed. Lord, I'm paying attention. Help me see clearly. What followed over the next 6 weeks was not a romance in the way the word is typically used. It was something more substantive and more costly than that. It was the slow, careful, God-conscious process of 2 people trying to discern something real without getting ahead of the one they had both built their lives around. He called when he said he would. Not a small thing. Consistency in small commitments is one of the most reliable indicators of character, every time, without exception. Their conversations were long and honest and unhurried. He asked about her faith history. Not the highlight reel, the actual history, the seasons of doubt, the prayers that felt like they landed on the ceiling, the things she had surrendered, and the things she was still in the process of surrendering. He asked because he had his own version of those things and wasn't willing to pretend otherwise. He had done work on himself, emotional work, spiritual work, the kind of interior renovation that doesn't show up on a resume, but is immediately apparent when you spend real time with someone. He was not a wounded man pretending to be healed. He was a man who had walked through the wounding honestly and come out with more compassion and more self-awareness than he'd had going in. It was a Wednesday evening, their 5th or 6th call. She had stopped counting. When she mentioned the firm, she had been deliberate about how much of her professional life she put on the table, not out of shame, out of discernment. She had learned that how a man responds to the fullness of a woman's capability tells you something his character alone cannot. She told him what she had built, the staff, the clients, the reach, what it had cost her, and what it had returned. He was quiet for a moment. Then, "That's genuinely impressive. You've done something most people only talk about." She received that. It was warm, and she believed he meant it. But then he added, lightly, almost as an afterthought, the way people say things they don't hear themselves saying. "I imagine it must be hard, though, being taken seriously in those rooms, as a young woman. That space doesn't always make it easy." She paused, not because it was cruel, not because it was even factually wrong. In the broadest sense, it wasn't inaccurate. It was the architecture underneath it, the assumption baked into the sympathy, that her primary experience in those rooms was the obstacle of her gender, rather than the authority of her calling, that what she had built was remarkable in spite of something rather than as the straightforward expression of a woman operating exactly as God designed her to. She redirected the conversation, gently, naturally. He didn't notice the redirect, but she held that moment quietly on the inside the way you hold something small and sharp, carefully, not yet sure what to do with it. She did not name it that night, did not bring it to prayer, did not call Nadia. She filed it in the back of a drawer she didn't open often and kept going. She told Nadia about him on a Sunday afternoon, sitting on the kitchen floor the way they'd been sitting on floors together since they were 19. "He doesn't perform, Nadia. Every time I wait for the performance, it doesn't come. He's consistent in private, in how he talks about people who can't do anything for him, in the way he prays, like he actually believes God is listening." Nadia was quiet for a moment. "What does your prayer sound like when you bring him to God?" The question stopped her. "Honest," she finally said. "More honest than it's been in years. I'm not asking God to make it work. I'm asking him to show me what's true, whatever that is." Nadia nodded slowly. "That's a good prayer, Zoe. Hold on to that one." She held on to it. On a Tuesday call that stretched past midnight, Christopher said something she hadn't expected. "I want to be honest with you. I've been bringing this to God seriously, laying it down every day and asking him to show me what's real and what's mine to step toward." He paused. "I feel something here that I can't reduce to emotion or chemistry, something that feels like leading. And I want you to know that, not to pressure you, because I think you deserve honesty more than you deserve comfort." She sat with that long after the call ended, and when she prayed that night, the quiet that came back felt like the presence of someone who was listening. She had almost forgotten that particular quality of quiet was possible to feel about this. The shift did not announce itself. That is the nature of certain kinds of discernment. They don't arrive as sirens. They arrive as a single degree of temperature change, so gradual you can't identify the moment, only the accumulation, Mother Agnes was the first marker, Zoe's spiritual mother for 6 years, a woman who had walked with God long enough to move in a quiet authority that needs no announcement. After a Sunday service, Zoe shared, carefully, holding the joy close without putting too much of it on the table, about Christopher, what had been growing, what she had been praying. Mother Agnes listened fully, without interruption, and when Zoe finished, she took her hand and said simply, "He sounds like a good man. I'm not saying he isn't, but keep your ear very close to God on this one, baby. Not to me, not to what you feel, not to what he says, to God. Keep listening." Not a warning, not a prophecy, just a woman who had learned something about doors that Zoe hadn't yet learned. Zoe kept listening, and the quiet that had felt like peace began to feel dimensional, like a room she thought she knew that turned out to have more walls than she'd initially seen. Not alarming, just more than she had accounted for. She began to notice small things, nothing that would hold up in a conversation, just moments, subtle compressions in her spirit during certain exchanges, a resistance she couldn't attribute to fear because she knew the difference between fear and discernment. She had paid for that knowledge. Fear says this could hurt you. Discernment says this isn't the door. She did not want it to be discernment. That's what made it hard. She was not manufacturing an exit. She was not running from something that simply demanded more courage than she felt ready for. She had already worked through her fear. She had already submitted her walls to God and asked Him to dismantle the ones that were habit rather than protection. This was something else. This was something being shown. The joint service ran long and warm. Both congregations filling the same room, the same worship, the kind of shared evening that reminds you the body is bigger than any single building. Afterward, she moved through the side corridor looking for the children's ministry lead from her team when she heard his voice, Christopher, with another pastor, older, familiar with him. Post-event, guard completely down. They were talking about 2 women on Christopher's ministry team, a worship leader and a young woman recently appointed to a pastoral role. "They're capable," Christopher said, and he meant it. There was no contempt in his voice, no edge. But women in those positions need more deliberate structure around them, more scaffolding. You have to be more intentional about the oversight. The other pastor agreed. The conversation moved on. Zoe stood in the corridor. She didn't step forward, didn't announce herself, because she wasn't reacting to something shocking. She was recognizing something she had already half seen. She reached into the back of that drawer, retrieved what she had placed there on the Wednesday call, that small, sharp thing she had filed away without naming, the architecture of his sympathy, the assumption underneath the warmth, and now this, the scaffolding, the oversight, the particular way a good man can genuinely believe he is caring for women in leadership while never quite believing they belong there without management. It wasn't hatred. That's what made it so difficult to hold. It was a quiet theology, buried so deep in a man's formation that he couldn't see it from the inside. He would be genuinely confused if she tried to show him. Not defensive, confused. Because from where he stood, what he said was structure, good leadership, care. And here is what Zoe understood, standing in that corridor. She was a woman who had built a firm from a spare bedroom, who led her own ministry team, who would one day, she believed this with full clarity, be doing something in God's kingdom that would require the man beside her to see her not as capable in spite of, not as needing scaffolding, but as fully trusted, fully seen, operating in a calling he honored without ceiling. The 2 moments sat in her hand at the same time, and the accumulation of it, quiet as it was was undeniable. She walked back into the hall, found her colleague, said her goodbyes, and drove home knowing exactly what she had to do. She called him 2 days later. She had prayed through every word, not to manage the conversation or protect herself from the difficulty of it, but because she believed the way you end something matters. The way you honor someone in a closing moment says something about who you are and what you believe about them. "I need to be honest with you," she said, "because that's what you've always deserved from me. I've been in the listening, and what I keep coming back to is that there isn't peace here. Not the sustaining kind. Not the kind that holds when I press on it honestly before God. And that's not about a failure on your part. You are genuinely one of the most faith-grounded men I have known. That part is true." She paused. "But I've learned, at cost, that a man can be a good man and still not be my man. And I think God has been trying to help me see that for longer than I allowed myself to look." Silence. Then his voice, low, steady, real. "Can you tell me what you saw?" She thought about the corridor, the Wednesday call, how to say it without reducing him to a verdict he wouldn't even recognize as himself. "I saw something in how you see women in their calling. Not once, twice. Small enough that most people would miss it. But I've been in ministry my whole adult life. I've built something of my own. And I know the difference between a man who trusts what God has placed in a woman and a man who accommodates it. I need the first one. Not because you're less, but because of what God has put in me." A long silence. "I'm not going to fight what God is saying to you," he said finally. "I respect you too much, and I respect him too much." A breath. "I just need you to know. I genuinely believed he was in this." Then quietly, "Part of me still does." She held the phone after the call ended, sat in the silence of her kitchen. Outside, the street was still, the neighborhood completely indifferent to what had just happened inside that room. The world kept moving. It always does. It does not pause for the private surrenders that cost us everything. She went to her bedroom, sat on the floor, back against the bed frame, knees to her chest, not reaching for anything, just present to the ache of it. This is the moment the story opened on, and now you have everything that brought her here. A woman who had built a full life and was still learning what it meant to trust God with the parts she couldn't build herself. A woman who had prayed with sincerity, felt something real, walked faithfully through something that still ended in a closed door, who had not been reckless, who had not been fearful, who had simply been obedient, and discovered that obedience is sometimes the most quietly devastating thing God will ever ask of you. She picked up her journal, opened it, and beneath the 5 words she had written hours earlier, "I don't understand you, Lord," she added the 5 words she had meant every single time she had prayed them and meant them now more than ever. "But I still trust you." She set the pen down, opened her Bible without looking for anything specific, and landed on the verse her father had made her memorize when she was 11 years old, the one he said would hold her when nothing else did. "Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make your paths straight." All your heart. She sat with that, not the parts that understood, not the parts at peace, not the parts that had moved on. All of it. The part that still heard his voice on the phone, the part that had felt genuinely led and was still sitting in the honesty of that, the part that did not know what came next and was learning again from the floor that not knowing is not the same as being lost. She bowed her head and prayed the most mature thing she had ever brought to God. Not give him back, not make it make sense, not show me I was right. Just Lord, I trust you with all of it. Every part I understand and every part I don't. Even this, even tonight, even the grief I haven't finished feeling yet. I trust you. And the quiet that came back, finally, after everything, felt like peace again. Not the peace of resolution, not the peace of answers, the peace of presence, the peace of a God who does not explain himself in every season, but who does not leave, who was in the room before the prayer started and will be in the room long after the journal closes, who holds with the same hand both the desire and the not yet, and calls both of them love.
Thanks for watching. Subscribe to our channel. We love you. Stay tuned for part 2.